Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepless Scientist. Tonight we'll wander into one of the deepest mysteries, the question of why time itself seems to flow forward. If you find comfort in these journeys, feel free to like and subscribe, only if it feels right, and leave a comment with where you are and what time it is. I love seeing how far these moments travel. Now dim the lights, let a soft hum fill the room, and let's begin. If your thoughts drift, that's fine. We'll still be here. Take a moment to let your shoulders fall, to unclench the jaw you didn't realise had been tight, to notice the rhythm of your breath as it comes and goes. The day you carried is already fading. The world outside might still be noisy, clocks still ticking, schedules still unfolding, but here you've stepped into a quieter corner. Tonight we're talking about time, that most slippery of companions, the invisible thread that binds our days and nights, the thing that seems to pull us forward whether we're ready or not. Time is always with us, yet rarely in focus. You don't wake up and touch time as you would the alarm clock on your nightstand. You don't hold it in your hands, though you may check the watch on your wrist. And yet without time, nothing else would make sense. The heartbeat would not have a rhythm. A sentence would not find its end. A day would not unfold into evening. Time is like the water a fish swims in, unnoticed until you stop to ask what it means. And the more we ask, the slipperier it becomes. For centuries people have tried to grasp time. Philosophers sat in cloisters and wrote about it with quills and parchment, their candles burning low. Scientists pointed telescopes at stars, built clocks from gears and pendulums, compared the swing of shadows, measured drips of water and ticks of quartz. Each culture, each age, thought it had almost pinned down this elusive flow. And yet even today, with equations that stretch across blackboards and computers that model the birth of galaxies, the question remains partly unanswered. What is time really? And why does it go only one way? If you've ever waited for water to boil, you know time can feel stubborn, almost mocking. The kettle refuses to sing. The minutes drag. And yet, spend those same minutes with a loved one or in the middle of a favourite hobby, and suddenly they vanish, quick as breath. Our lived time stretches and contracts, while the clock on the wall insists on being steady. There is tension here, between the time of physics and the time of experience, and both will join us tonight in this gentle exploration. But there is another puzzle, deeper still. It isn't only that time is felt differently, or measured differently. It is that time itself seems to flow in a single direction. The past is fixed, the future unwritten. Eggs crack but never uncrack. Coffee cools but never warms itself again. Leaves fall from trees but never climb back to the branch. There is a direction here, an arrow pointing forward, and yet the laws of physics in their elegant equations often make no such distinction. They work just as well backward as forward, like a film that could be played in reverse. So why do we experience only one direction? Why is our universe bent toward the forward motion, toward memory and not prophecy, toward birth and not reversal? That is the riddle of the arrow of time, and it is the question that will guide us softly through this entire night. From Augustine's struggle to define what the present even is, to the age of trains that demanded synchronized clocks, to Einstein's vision of time stitched into the fabric of space, to the thermodynamic whisper of entropy that insists on disorder, to the far horizon where the universe itself may grow still in a final heat death. We will wander carefully, slowly, like walking through a forest where each tree is a story and each path another clue. Of course, if you drift off midway, that's fine. Time in your sleep will pass in its own strange rhythm. You may dream of other moments, perhaps childhood summers, perhaps future hopes, perhaps nothing at all, and when you wake, the story will still be here, waiting. Time, after all, always waits for the next second to arrive. You cannot lose it, you can only move with it, so do not worry about keeping up. Let the story carry you like a current you can float upon. For now, imagine yourself outside, beneath the sky of your own place. Perhaps there are stars visible, tiny reminders of time's vastness, their light having travelled across thousands or millions of years to reach you. Perhaps there are only clouds drifting as they always do, reshaping themselves with each passing breath of wind. Perhaps you're in a city, the hum of traffic filling the air, or in a countryside where insects sing. Wherever you are, the moment you occupy is uniquely yours, and yet it is also shared, linked by time to all other moments, all other listeners, each in their own corner of the world. That is what I find beautiful when we begin these journeys together. You may be listening from a quiet apartment in the middle of the night, or a noisy home where you're trying to find a pause, or perhaps you're on the other side of the world just starting your morning. We arrive together in this single shared moment, though each of our clocks says something different, and somehow in the web of time we've met here. That alone feels miraculous. So let us begin, not in a rush, but gently. Tonight, we ask why time started going forward, and whether it truly flows at all, or whether it is an illusion shaped by memory, entropy, and the slow cooling of stars. We will not hurry. The answers, like everything else in time, will unfold at their own pace. All you need to do is listen, breathe, and drift. If your eyelids grow heavy, let them. If your mind wanders, let it. The story of time is wide enough to hold you, awake or asleep, curious or drowsy. And in that story you may find not only physics and philosophy, but also a kind of comfort. The comfort of knowing that even the greatest mystery moves gently, second by second, heartbeat by heartbeat. So, settle in. Let the quiet come closer. Let time itself slip to the edges of your attention. Because tonight, we're stepping into the river that carries us all and asking softly, why does it only ever flow one way? If you want to understand how deeply time unsettles the human mind, you only need to step back into the 4th century, when a bishop named Augustine sat down to write his Confessions. It was not a book of science, though it has echoes of philosophy. It was not even meant as a treatise about the universe, but as a prayer, a record of one man's searching heart. And yet hidden inside, like a thread of gold in a rough fabric, there lies one of the earliest and most honest struggles with the mystery of time. He asked a question so simple that it still echoes. What then is time? Augustine began with a paradox. If no one asks him what time is, he thinks he knows. But if someone does ask and presses him to explain, suddenly he realizes he does not know at all. That is the strangeness of time. It hides in plain sight. We live every moment within it. We measure birthdays and festivals by it. We grow older by its passing. Yet when we try to hold it in words, it slips through our grasp like water cupped in open hands. He noticed something else, something almost childlike in its simplicity. The past is no longer here. It exists only in memory. The future has not yet come. It exists only in expectation. And the present, what is it really? A knife's edge between what is gone and what is not yet. If you try to stretch the present into anything wider than a fleeting instant, it collapses. That is the puzzle. Our lives feel full of days, hours and years, but in truth we only ever touch this trembling, vanishing present. For Augustine, this was not merely a philosophical puzzle, it was a kind of torment. He saw time as a devourer, a great beast that consumes all things. Civilizations rise and fall, empires he knew, Rome most of all, would one day be dust. He saw himself aging, his hair thinning, his body less resilient. Time was a lion that ate everything in its path, calmly, without remorse. He wrote of it almost with dread, the way one might speak of a predator that cannot be escaped. And yet Augustine also found time enchanting. He thought of it as a river, a current carrying us all forward. The river does not wait, it does not look back. It sweeps every moment downstream, and no swimmer can reach backward into the flow. There is beauty in the image, but also sadness. A child laughs, and before you can treasure it fully, the moment is gone. A prayer rises, and even as the words are still in the air, they are already behind you. Imagine Augustine walking through the streets of Hippo, the city in North Africa where he served as bishop. The world around him would have been filled with voices, carts rolling over stones, the sun lifting and falling. But he would have seen it differently, always shadowed by the awareness that everything he looked upon was dissolving into the past. The shouts of merchants, the laughter of children, even his own sermons, all were swallowed as soon as they appeared. This realization gave him urgency, but it also gave him sorrow. You might think, listening centuries later, that he was being overly dramatic. But if you pause for a moment, perhaps you know the feeling yourself. Have you ever sat in a cafe, hearing people talking, cups clinking, music playing faintly, and thought, this is already gone? That even as you notice it, the present is slipping into memory. It can make even an ordinary afternoon feel strangely fragile. That fragility is what Augustine put into words, trembling words, in his book. He wrestled with another difficulty. If the past and future do not truly exist, if the past is only memory and the future only anticipation, then why do we speak of long times, of years and centuries? Why do we measure? He concluded that time in some sense must live inside the mind. It is not an object, not a thing flowing through the air. It is the stretching of the soul, the way memory holds the past, attention anchors the present, and expectation leans into the future. Time, he thought, is less about the world outside and more about the consciousness within. This thought is at once comforting and unsettling. Comforting, because it means time is close to us, intimate, not a distant clock, but a rhythm in the heart. Unsettling, because it means time is not something we can step outside of or fix into certainty. It is tied to our frailty, our forgetfulness, our hope. In Augustine's view, time was not a cosmic river at all. It was a human experience woven into our very being. And yet Augustine left the question open. What then is time? He asked. And even after pages of reflection, he admitted he had no final answer. That honesty is perhaps why his words still resonate. He didn't solve the puzzle. He simply showed us how mysterious it is. The fact that centuries later, physicists, philosophers and poets still return to the same question suggests that maybe there is no solution in the ordinary sense. Time is not a riddle to be solved, but a horizon to be contemplated. There is something tender in imagining him sitting at his desk, quill scratching against parchment, pausing to stare at the wall or the flame of a candle, wondering if the flicker of light, even as he watched it, had already become the past. The struggle is universal. You may find yourself, even now, looking at the shadows on your wall or hearing the faint hum of a distant appliance and realizing that you are caught in the same paradox. You only ever live in this instant, and yet you are filled with memories of what has gone and expectations of what may come. That is Augustine's gift to us. The reminder that time, however obvious it feels, is in truth strange, elusive, and deeply human. It is not simply a line on a clock or a number on a phone screen. It is the very structure of how we live and remember. And though he left the question unanswered, the asking itself has echoed across the centuries, inspiring others to keep searching. As we leave Augustine's world, lit by candle and framed by stone walls, we carry his bewilderment with us. Ahead lie other thinkers, other visions. Newton will declare time to be absolute, ticking everywhere, steady and sure. Leibniz will argue back that time has no independent existence, only events in relation. But for now, let Augustine's uncertainty linger like the fading glow of a candle. Let his voice remind us that even 2,000 years ago, someone sat quietly in the night, asking the same question we are asking tonight. If Augustine left us with questions, Isaac Newton gave us answers, or at least what seemed like answers for more than 200 years. In the 17th century, Newton looked at the world and saw order hidden within apparent chaos. Apples falling, cannonballs flying, planets circling the sun, all of them he believed obeyed precise mathematical laws. To him, the universe was not a mystery so much as a machine, and like every machine, it needed both gears and a background in which those gears could turn. That background, he insisted, was space and time. For Newton, time was absolute. It flowed evenly, everywhere, always, without depending on anything else. He described it as absolute, true and mathematical time of itself and from its own nature, flowing equably without relation to anything external. In gentler words, he pictured time as a great invisible river, moving at the same speed for everyone, whether you were a farmer in his fields, a sailor at sea, or a planet gliding through the heavens. You could count on time like the steady tick of a perfect clock placed behind the stage of the universe. This was more than philosophy. Newton's laws of motion and gravity worked only because they were written against this steady backdrop. If you throw a ball today, or tomorrow, or in another city, his equations predict the path just the same. That regularity became one of the most powerful tools humans had ever discovered. With it, astronomers could chart eclipses centuries ahead. Engineers could design bridges and pendulums. The whole world could be described, calculated and predicted, all thanks to the assumption that time was marching on steadily beneath every event. To imagine Newton's universe, think of a giant clock tower, the kind you might find rising over an old town square. Inside are gears meshing smoothly, pendulums swinging with a precise beat, and bells ready to strike the hours. The people below live their daily lives, but above them, the clock ensures order no matter what chaos fills the streets. Newton's universe was like that clock tower, vast, intricate, and governed by a metronome of absolute time. This idea felt natural to many. After all, everyday life seems to agree with it. The sun rises and sets with reliable rhythm. A loaf of bread takes about the same time to bake today as it did yesterday. A horse gallops across a field, and the minutes tick by just the same whether you're watching or not. It is comforting to believe that time itself is steady, impartial, beyond the sway of human perception or circumstance. It makes the world less fragile, less uncertain. And yet, Newton's view was not without drama. He lived in an age of turbulence, when science was beginning to separate itself from old authorities. To say time was absolute was not just a technical claim, but a kind of declaration that the universe had rules, that human reason could discover them, and that those rules were not swayed by gods, kings, or moods. Time, in this model, was the impartial stagehand, invisible but essential, moving the play forward with relentless steadiness. Imagine the reassurance of this. If you are a sailor navigating uncertain seas, you can trust the stars will rise at calculable times. If you are an architect, you can trust your arches will hold as long as you've done the sums. If you are simply living, you can trust that tomorrow's seconds will arrive as reliably as today's. Newton's time was the heartbeat of certainty. Of course, it also had a darker side. If time flows absolutely, then every event is pinned to its place on the line, unchangeable once it has passed. A battle fought, a life ended, a word spoken, all are fixed in the ledger of time. This sense of inevitability could feel heavy. Yet in Newton's century, the comfort of predictability often outweighed the unease of determinism. The machine ticked on, and within its steady rhythm people found both order and possibility. Newton himself may have thought of time as a divine gift, part of the order bestowed upon creation. His faith and his science were not easily separated. For him, absolute time was not merely convenient mathematics, it was the way the universe was made. And because it worked so well in practice, few challenged it. For generations, absolute time became the language of science, the invisible foundation beneath physics, astronomy, and even daily commerce. Think of trains arriving at stations centuries later, synchronized by standardized timetables. Think of school bells, church bells, factory whistles. All of these depend on the idea that time is steady everywhere, always. Even today, when you set your alarm for 7 o'clock, you are in a sense a child of Newton's universe, trusting that hours are fixed slices of an absolute flow. But the beauty of science is that no idea, however beloved, is immune to question. Even in Newton's day, there were whispers of doubt. His rival, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, argued that time was not a thing in itself, but only a measure of change, a relation between events. Without events, Leibniz said, time had no meaning. But Newton's authority was immense, and his model so successful, that for centuries Leibniz's objection was little more than an echo against the great ticking clock. And so absolute time endured, like the steady ringing of a bell across generations. It told people they lived in a universe where seconds fell like grains of sand, regular and unyielding no matter who watched them fall. It made the cosmos feel knowable, calculable, navigable. It shaped not only science but culture, embedding itself in the way we talk, spending time, saving time, wasting time, as if it were a currency flowing whether we notice or not. Eventually, though, cracks began to appear. Experiments in the 19th century suggested that light did not quite obey Newton's stage. Measurements of electromagnetic waves hinted at something peculiar. The speed of a light seemed always the same, no matter how you moved. If time were truly absolute, this should not have been possible. The whispers of doubt grew louder, and a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein would one day step into the story, carrying with him equations that would turn Newton's stage upside down. But that belongs to another session. For now, it is enough to pause with Newton's vision, a universe steady and reliable, underpinned by absolute time, where every apple falls predictably, every planet sweeps its orbit with grace, and the great machine ticks onward. There is something soothing in that picture, something that makes the night feel less uncertain. It may not be the final truth, but for centuries it was enough to guide explorers, builders, and dreamers. So as you breathe quietly now, let yourself imagine the steady tick of a great cosmic clock, each beat marking a moment, each moment carrying you gently forward. That was Newton's gift, the sense that beneath the chaos of life there is order, beneath the uncertainty there is a rhythm, and beneath the stars themselves there is time, flowing evenly, faithfully for all. If Newton's universe was a grand clock ticking away on its own, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz wanted to remove the clock entirely. A contemporary of Newton, though also his rival in mathematics and philosophy, Leibniz looked at the same world of falling apples and orbiting planets and saw something very different. To him, time was not a stage that exists independently, humming along whether anyone is acting upon it or not. Time, he insisted, was only the measure of change, a relation between events. Without events, there is no time. This was not merely a quibble between scholars. At its heart, the disagreement was about what kind of universe we live in. Newton pictured time as an invisible background, something that continues whether the cosmos is full or empty. Even in a void, Newton thought, a clock would still tick. Leibniz shook his head. A clock in a void is not measuring anything, he argued. It is just an object moving its hands in meaningless circles. Time, he believed, cannot exist apart from the events it is supposed to describe. It is not a container in which the universe sits. It is a pattern made by the universe itself. To understand his vision, imagine yourself in a quiet room with nothing happening. No footsteps, no music, no flicker of light through the window, just stillness. You glance at your watch and see the second hand moving. Newton would say, "There is time, and your watch is marking it faithfully, even if nothing else changes." Leibniz would reply, "No, you only think there is time because you have a device moving its hand. If the watch were not there, and if nothing else changed in the room, there would be no time at all. Time, in this view, is not a river that flows independently. It is a shadow cast by motion and change. Leibniz's reasoning came partly from logic and partly from a kind of economy of thought. He believed the universe should not contain unnecessary structures. To posit a separate thing called absolute time was to him a wasteful addition. Better to say that time is simply a relation. One event happens before or after another, one melody follows another note, one footstep comes after the last. Nothing more is needed. This relational view made time feel less like a cosmic entity and more like a bookkeeping system invented by nature itself. It also had theological undertones. Leibniz, deeply religious, worried that Newton's absolute time made God seem less rational. If the universe were placed upon an infinite absolute time, then God would have chosen arbitrarily when to create it. Why here? Why now, if time stretches infinitely in both directions? Leibniz preferred to think that God created not within an empty stage, but created the stage itself. The universe, with all its events and changes, brought time into being as part of its structure. There was no meaningless eternity before the first moment. The first moment itself was the beginning of time. Philosophically, this sounds subtle, but it has consequences for how we imagine reality. If time is absolute, as Newton said, then it is possible to imagine the universe existing inside a great ticking framework, like actors on a stage that would remain standing even if the play ended. But if Leibniz is right, then without actors, without play, there is no stage at all. The curtain itself would vanish. Only the events give rise to the measure we call time. Let us ground this in something ordinary. Think of a song. You can speak of it as lasting 3 minutes, but really what is the duration? It is only the pattern of notes, the rhythm and melody unfolding. If nothing is played, there is no music and no duration. Time in a song is inseparable from the events of sound themselves. To Leibniz, the universe is like that song. The notes create the flow, not some silent metronome behind the music. There is a certain elegance in this vision, but also a fragility. If time is nothing more than relations between events, then what becomes of our intuition that time is always there, even when nothing happens? When you sit in silence, when you lie awake at night in darkness, don't you still feel the seconds drifting? Leibniz might answer that even in silence, your body is still changing, your thoughts are still moving. The heartbeat, the slow rhythm of breath, the faint shifting of memory and expectation, all of these events are enough to create the sense of time passing. Without them, perhaps there would be nothing at all. This debate did not end in Leibniz's day. In fact, it continues to ripple through physics even now. When modern scientists ask whether time is fundamental or emergent, they are asking in different words the same question Newton and Leibniz argued over. Is time a basic ingredient of reality, or is it something that arises from the dance of matter, energy, and change? The fascinating part is how both visions can feel true, depending on your perspective. In daily life, time feels like an independent flow. You check your phone, you see the clock move, you feel the day slip by. But when you zoom in on events, you realize that all you ever experience are changes. The light shifting in the sky, the coffee cooling in the cup, the heart slowing as you rest. The idea that time is nothing more than the record of these changes becomes less strange. It is as if we live within the music and mistake the rhythm for a separate entity. For centuries, Newton's version dominated because it was easier to calculate with. Engineers and astronomers could work with absolute time to predict eclipses and build machines. Leibniz's vision seemed too abstract, yet quietly, his insistence that time is relational has never been forgotten. It sits in the background of every discussion of space-time, entropy and quantum physics. His voice still asks, "Do not assume time is a thing. Perhaps it is only a way of speaking about how things change. So here we are with two portraits. Newton paints time as a grand river flowing evenly, existing whether we notice or not. Leibniz paints time as the reflection of change itself, a song that vanishes if no notes are played. Both images are beautiful. Both carry comfort and unease. And both will travel with us as we continue this journey, for the story of time is not finished and perhaps never will be. For now, let the contrast rest in your thoughts. Imagine the steady tick of a universal clock, and then imagine it disappearing if no one moves, no one breathes, no leaf stirs. Which feels closer to the truth? There may be no answer tonight, but in the wondering, you share something with two of history's greatest minds, and that, in its own quiet way, is enough. Long before Newton and Leibniz argued over whether time was absolute or relational, long before Augustine sat in his study pondering the fleeting present, ordinary people were already living with the problem of time in a very direct way. When should the fields be planted? When would the floodwaters rise? How long should the clay rest before it hardened into brick? Life required rhythm, and rhythm required some way of keeping track of the invisible passing of hours and seasons. Without equations, without telescopes, without anything we would call science today, our ancestors turned their eyes upward and outward to the simplest and most enduring of clocks, the heavens above and the shadows around them. The sun was the first great teacher of time. Every morning it rose and every evening it set. The length of its path across the sky told farmers when summer was swelling and when winter crept closer. To measure this, people began planting poles or obelisks upright in the ground. As the sun moved, the shadow shifted, long in the morning and evening, short at midday. From this pattern, the earliest sundials were born. You can almost picture a cluster of Egyptians 3,000 years ago, watching the dark line creep across the sand beside a tall stone obelisk. That moving shadow was not simply an absence of light, it was a visible hand sweeping across the day. But the sun, faithful as it was, had its limits. Clouds could obscure it, night would erase it, and so other methods were invented. In ancient Egypt and later in Greece and China, the water clock became a solution. These devices were bowls with small holes near the bottom. Water would drip slowly from one vessel to another, or sometimes fill up a container until a marker reached a line. The steady flow of water mimicked the steady flow of time, one drop after another, impossible to reverse. Imagine standing in a quiet temple courtyard at night, hearing the faint plink of water into a jar. That sound, measured and unhurried, was time made audible. Water clocks were surprisingly clever. Some were marked inside with graduated lines so priests or officials could tell how many hours had passed even in total darkness. Others were designed to ring bells, open doors, or even move figurines at particular times. They were, in a sense, the first programmable devices, little cousins of the clocks that would one day drive railways and factories. And though their accuracy was limited by temperature, by flow rate, by the size of the holes, they were accurate enough to structure rituals, mark legal proceedings, and give people a common rhythm in a world before watches. And then there were the stars. The night sky was not just decoration, it was a tapestry of reliable signals. The phases of the moon divided months. The rising of certain constellations heralded planting or harvest. For the ancient Maya, the careful observation of Venus was critical. They tracked its cycles with astonishing precision, linking them to calendars that stretched across centuries. Even without telescopes, patterns in the heavens became guides, turning the unfathomable vastness above into a practical tool for organizing life on Earth. Think of a shepherd lying on his back in a field, centuries ago, watching Orion climb the horizon. He knows from experience that when Orion returns at nightfall, the new season is beginning. Or think of sailors in Polynesia, reading the stars as if they were maps, memorizing where each bright point should appear at different times of year. For them, the stars were both compass and clock, Every glittering point told a story not only of where they were, but of when they were. It is easy for us, with phones in our pockets flashing precise atomic time, to overlook how wondrous these first steps were. To take a shadow, or a drip of water, or the rising of a star, and to turn it into a measure of something as intangible as time, that is an act of imagination as much as of practicality. Time was invisible, but with these tools it gained a body, a way of being seen and trusted. Of course, none of these methods were perfect. Sundials changed their rhythm with the seasons, hours lengthening in summer and shrinking in winter. Water clocks slowed on cold nights and sped in heat. Stars wandered in their patterns and cloudy skies hid them from view. But perfection was not the point. What mattered was the rhythm, the sense that human life could align itself with cosmic cycles. In measuring time, people were not only organising labour, they were participating in the larger order of the universe, synchronising their breath with the turning of the heavens. And in these early devices lies a quiet truth. Timekeeping has always been less about knowing exactly how many seconds pass, and more about creating shared rhythm. A farmer and his neighbour agreeing when to sow, a priest knowing when to call the faithful, a market trader promising to return at dawn. All these acts rely on a common understanding of time. The sundial, the water clock, the stars. Each was less a scientific instrument and more a bridge between human community and cosmic rhythm. There is something soothing in imagining those early moments of timekeeping. A family looking at a shadow stretching across the courtyard, marking the moment for a meal. A temple official leaning over a jar, noting the rise of water as chants echo through the air. A sailor steering by the stars, his eyes adjusting to the glittering dome of night. These were not just technical acts, they were human acts, born of the need to belong within the unfolding rhythm of days and seasons. So, before the philosophers puzzled over whether time was real, before physicists wrote equations for entropy or relativity, people already lived inside a dance of shadows, drops and stars. Their time was measured not with precision but with participation. And perhaps in that there is a lesson. Time does not only belong to scientists and philosophers, it belongs to all of us, marked by every sunrise, every heartbeat, every drip of water in the night. The story of time changed dramatically with the arrival of machines. For millennia, timekeeping had been tied to natural rhythms, the rising of the sun, the dripping of water, the arc of the stars. But in the last few centuries, particularly during the Industrial Revolution, time began to detach itself from nature and fasten itself to gears, whistles, and schedules. It became something standardized, something precise, something that could be divided evenly into hours and minutes across a nation. The spark for this shift was not philosophy or even science, it was railways. When trains began to crisscross Europe and America in the 19th century, they brought speed and distance together in a way the world had never known. A train could cover in hours what once took days. But to coordinate that speed, to avoid collisions and to make timetables meaningful, people needed a common clock. Before the railways, each town often kept its own local time, based on the sun's position overhead. Noon in one town might be a few minutes later than noon in another just down the road. In a world of horse-drawn carts, this hardly mattered. In a world of speeding locomotives, it became a recipe for disaster. So clocks were synchronized. Railways began to demand that stations across hundreds of miles use a single reference time. In Britain, that became Greenwich Mean Time, tied to the Royal Observatory near London. Conductors carried watches. Stations hung standardized clocks, and suddenly time was no longer local but national. Imagine standing on a station platform in the 1850s, looking at the great iron engine steaming and hissing, and glancing up at the new clock fixed above the platform. It told you more than the hour. It told you that the entire country was now moving in step. The factory reinforced this change. With the spread of industrial labour, workers were expected to arrive and depart at precise times. The bell of the factory was not unlike the tolling of church bells, but its purpose was different. It was not to call the faithful to prayer. It was to summon bodies to machines to signal the start and stop of shifts. Time became money in the most literal sense. Minutes lost to lateness were minutes lost to production. Clocks hung on walls not as ornaments but as overseers, reminding every worker that the rhythm of their day was no longer set by sun or stomach, but by the tick of gears. This new order brought benefits. Coordinated time made trade easier, transportation safer, communication clearer. Letters could carry promises not just of soon or after harvest, but of precise dates. Schedules gave people confidence that a train would arrive at 10:15, not simply sometime in the morning. Society began to hum in synchrony, a chorus of clocks ringing in unison. But something else was lost as well. The fluid, local sense of time, of mornings that stretched with the sun's warmth, of evenings marked by birds returning to roost, was replaced by rigid slices measured by machinery. Think of the difference. Imagine a farmer before the age of railways, watching the shadows lengthen to know when to return from the field. Now picture a factory worker, glancing anxiously at the clock above the gate, careful not to be even a minute late. Time was no longer the rhythm of nature, it was the rhythm of commerce. It marched with the hiss of steam and the ringing of bells. And yet there is something strangely arbitrary about this new standard time. After all, there is nothing in the universe that decrees that 1 minute must be exactly 60 seconds, that noon must strike at the same moment across a continent. These divisions are human inventions, useful but artificial. The Earth does not care about schedules. The sun still rises and sets on its own terms. But as humans, we bent time to fit our machines, and in doing so we began to treat it as if it were more absolute than even Newton had imagined. Railway time soon grew into global time. With the expansion of telegraphs and later radio, signals could synchronize clocks across vast distances. In 1884, an international conference declared Greenwich the prime meridian, fixing not only British trains but the world itself to a single standard. Time zones were carved across the globe, each a neat hour apart, though in reality the Earth spins smoothly and continuously. It was a bold act of simplification, one that allowed international trade, travel and communication to flourish. But it was also a reminder that our experience of time is shaped not just by the cosmos, but by the needs of society. Consider how much of our lives today are still bound by this inheritance. Airplanes crossing oceans obey the lines of time zones. Computers synchronize their clocks to global servers. Meetings take place across continents because we can all agree what 3 p.m. means, even if it falls at sunrise for one person and midnight for another. The pulse of standardized time is everywhere, steady and inescapable, and yet beneath this mechanical rhythm, the old natural rhythms still persist. You might check your phone for the hour, but your body still feels the warmth of afternoon sun, still grows drowsy at nightfall, still wakes with the light. The circadian rhythm pays no attention to Greenwich. It moves with hormones, with light and dark, with ancient cycles older than any railway. There is then a tension between the time we live by socially and the time we live by biologically. The age of machines gave us the gift of coordination, but it also left us with a question. Is standardized time truly real, or is it a convenient fiction, an overlay on top of deeper, older patterns? When you hear a train whistle echo across the night, when you glance at a glowing digital clock beside your bed, you are seeing not the universe's time, but humanity's time. The two are not identical, and perhaps they never will be. So as you listen tonight, perhaps you can hear in the distance both rhythms at once, the heartbeat of your own body, older than civilization, and the ticking of the clock on your wall, younger than the steam engine. Between them lies the story of how humans took the immeasurable flow of moments and turned it into a schedule. And in that story, you may sense both the triumph and the irony of our species, that we sought to master time only to discover we were simply giving it another mask. For all the bells, whistles, and glowing digits of modern clocks, there remains another rhythm we cannot escape, a rhythm that has been beating inside us long before there were railways or factories or even language. This is the rhythm of the body, the silent clockwork of cells and hormones that knows when to wake and when to rest, when to prepare for the day, and when to fold into the dark. It is the circadian rhythm, a 24-hour cycle that whispers through every organ and tissue, shaping our lives whether we acknowledge it or not. If you have ever felt jet lag, you know how powerful this rhythm is. You step off a plane into another time zone and find that the sun is blazing though your body insists it is midnight. Your appetite is misplaced, your alertness stumbles, your eyes grow heavy while the world around you is fully awake. It is a reminder that inside you there is a clock that does not care what the train schedule or the phone display says. It is tuned to light and darkness, to the daily rising and setting of the sun, and it resists being shifted. This inner timekeeper is not located in a watch or a dial, but in a cluster of cells deep in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Each day, light entering through the eyes resets this biological clock, keeping it aligned with the world outside. From there, signals spread through the body, adjusting hormone levels, metabolism, even the temperature of your skin. When evening comes, melatonin rises, nudging you toward rest. When morning returns, cortisol rises, coaxing you into wakefulness. The cycle turns and turns, a silent companion guiding you through each day. But the circadian rhythm is not the only way the body measures time. On smaller scales, cells have their own timers. Some divide after precise intervals. Muscles remember how long to contract. The heart sets its own beat, as we explored earlier. In a way, the body is a symphony of clocks, each playing its part, sometimes in harmony, sometimes out of tune. When the harmony holds, we feel balanced. When it falters, we feel exhausted or unwell. Sleep disorders, metabolic illnesses, even mood swings can often be traced back to clocks gone slightly astray. Beyond the biology of cycles, there is also the strange landscape of psychological time. This is not about hormones or neurons ticking, but about perception. How the mind experiences the flow of moments. You already know the odd elasticity of this kind of time. 10 minutes in a dentist's waiting room stretch into what feels like an hour, while 10 minutes lost in laughter with a friend seem to vanish in an instant. The clock on the wall insists both intervals were equal, but the mind quietly disagrees. Why does this happen? Psychologists suggest it has to do with attention. When little is happening, our minds grow restless and count every passing second, each tick amplified into awareness. Time drags, but when something engages us fully, our attention is occupied and we no longer mark the passing moments. They slip by unnoticed, and only when we resurface do we realise how much time has gone. This is the essence of what psychologists call flow, a state of immersion where the usual boundaries of time dissolve, and you feel absorbed into the present. Memory plays a role too. Think back to childhood summers. They seemed endless, didn't they? Long afternoons playing, small adventures, constant novelty. As children, we encounter so many firsts. First games, first trips, first discoveries. The brain works harder to record all these experiences, and later, looking back, those days feel stretched and abundant. Compare that to adulthood, when routines dominate and novelty grows scarce. The brain records less detail, compressing events into shorter feeling stretches. Time seems to speed up, not because it actually does, but because memory no longer paints the days with the same density. Emotion colours time as well. Fear can slow it, creating the impression of slow motion during a car accident or other sudden danger. Joy and excitement can speed it, shrinking hours into moments. Sadness can stretch time, each day feeling heavier and longer. In this sense, time is not only measured by clocks or even by biology, it is also measured by the heart. cultural differences add yet another layer. In English, we speak of time as a commodity, spending it, saving it, wasting it. Other languages treat time more like a landscape or a condition. Among the Aymara people of the Andes, the past is described as being in front, visible and known, while the future is behind, unseen and mysterious. These metaphors shape how people feel about time. To one culture, the future is something you walk toward. To another, it is something that sneaks up from behind. The science of clocks does not change, but the lived experience does. All of this reminds us that while the universe may one day end in heat death, while entropy may stretch forward toward maximum disorder, the time that matters to us day to day is softer, more immediate and more intimate. It is the tug of sleep when the night grows late. It is the quickening of hours when joy fills them. It is the dragging of minutes when boredom settles in. It is the memory of a childhood that seemed to last forever, and the surprise of midlife when decades vanish behind you, like a handful of leaves tossed into the wind. So as you lie listening now, think of the many clocks that are moving within you and around you. The digital numbers glowing on your device mark standardized time, Greenwich's legacy. The hormones coursing through your body mark circadian time, a cycle older than any civilization. Your thoughts and feelings mark psychological time, stretching and shrinking it according to your inner landscape. All three weave together to form the tapestry of your lived experience. And perhaps, in noticing them, you may feel a little less bound to the strict ticking of the clock on your wall. Time is not only that rigid sequence, it is also the warmth of afternoon light, the rhythm of your breathing, the memories you treasure, and the anticipation of what might come. All of these are ways of living in time, and they remind us that before it is a scientific concept, time is first of all the gentle companion of human life. For more than 2 centuries after Newton, his picture of time as absolute seemed unshakable. The universe was a vast stage, and time was the metronome behind the curtain, ticking evenly everywhere no matter who was watching. Astronomers, sailors, engineers, all lived in the comfort of this steady rhythm. But in the early 20th century, a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein stepped quietly into the story, and with a series of papers, he turned that stage upside down. In his hands, time was no longer absolute. It was not even separate. It was woven together with space into a single fabric, pliable and strange. A fabric we now call spacetime. Imagine standing by a railway track on a dark evening. A train speeds by, and at the very moment it reaches the midpoint between 2 trees, a flash of lightning strikes each tree, one to the left, one to the right. From your place on the platform, the flashes appear simultaneous. You see both bursts of light at once, the sky briefly split in 2 directions. Now picture yourself not on the platform, but on the train, seated at the midpoint as it races forward. As you move toward the right-hand tree, the light from that strike reaches you before the light from the left-hand tree. To you, on the train, the right-hand lightning clearly came first. Which observer is correct? According to Einstein, both are. There is no single universal now. What is simultaneous for one observer may not be for another. The flow of time depends on where you are and how you are moving. This realization is unsettling at first. For centuries, people assumed there must be one true time, the master clock of the universe. Einstein showed that time is woven into space, and both are relative to the observer. 2 people can disagree on whether events happened at the same moment, and neither is wrong. The idea of a universal present, something we all share, slips away. The stage is no longer rigid and eternal. It is a fabric that bends and stretches. To picture this fabric, imagine a sheet of soft cloth held taut. Place a marble in the centre, and the cloth dips, curving under the weight. Now roll a smaller marble across the sheet. Instead of moving in a straight line, it curves around the heavier marble. In Einstein's general theory of relativity, Space and time together form that fabric. Planets, stars and galaxies sit upon it, bending it with their mass. Light itself follows the curves, just as the marble did. Gravity, in this vision, is no longer a force pulling across space, as Newton imagined. It is the bending of the stage itself, a curvature of space-time. Time is drawn into this curvature as well. Near massive objects, clocks tick more slowly. This is not a matter of broken mechanics or faulty gears. It is a fundamental feature of the universe. An astronaut circling near a black hole would experience time passing differently from her twin waiting far away. To the one outside, she seems slowed, her seconds stretched. To herself, everything feels normal. Both views are true, because time itself is part of the fabric being bent. Even here on Earth, the effect is measurable. Clocks placed at different altitudes tick at slightly different rates. A clock on a mountain runs faster than one at sea level, simply because it is farther from the centre of Earth's gravity. The difference is tiny, but it exists. In fact, our global positioning system, the GPS that tells you where you are when you check your phone, depends on correcting for these relativistic effects. Satellites orbiting high above Earth move through weaker gravity and at higher speeds. Both factors shift their ticking. Without Einstein's corrections, your phone's map would quickly drift, placing you miles from where you really are. Each time you find a cafe or a street corner with GPS, you are quietly relying on the curved stage of space-time. Einstein's vision changes not only calculations but imagination. Newton's universe felt like a giant clock, steady and reliable. Einstein's feels more like a vast fabric, elastic and dynamic. It can be stretched by cosmic expansion, curved by galaxies, even rippled by gravitational waves. Time is no longer something that simply flows. It is something that can stretch and compress depending on where you stand. There is a dreamlike quality in realizing that your seconds are not identical to mine, that every person, every clock, every planet lives in its own slightly unique rhythm. For daily life, the differences are too small to notice. You and I still agree on the start of a meal or the end of a film, but on cosmic scales the differences grow profound. A star near a black hole will age more slowly than its twin in the emptiness of space. Two travellers moving at near light speed may live entire lives, while centuries pass for those they left behind. The universe is not a single steady march, but a vast choir, each voice carrying its own tempo, harmonising yet never entirely in unison. It is tempting to see this as a kind of poetry, but it is also hard physics, verified again and again by experiment. Airplane clocks compared with those on the ground show the predicted differences. Particle accelerators push subatomic particles to speeds near light, and their lifetimes stretch exactly as Einstein described. Even gravitational waves detected in recent years confirm that space-time is a fabric, rippling as black holes collide. The vision is as accurate as it is strange. What does this mean for us? Perhaps nothing urgent. You can still catch your bus, still boil your kettle, still fall asleep, without worrying that your seconds differ from your neighbours. But it also means that beneath the surface of ordinary life, time is not quite what it seems. There is no universal present binding us all. There is no stage that exists independently of events. There is only the fabric, bending and stretching, carrying us along. So as you listen now, you might imagine yourself resting on that fabric, your body a small weight creating a gentle dip. The earth itself a larger weight beneath you. The sun an even greater one beyond. You are part of the tapestry, inseparable from it. Your seconds and minutes are not abstract ticks, but ripples in the fabric of space-time. That realization, far from frightening, can be quietly comforting. We are woven into the universe itself, not passengers on an external clock. We belong to the fabric. If Einstein's curved stage showed us that time bends with gravity, his theory also revealed something even stranger. Time bends with motion. The faster you move, the slower your clock ticks compared with someone who stays still. This effect, called time dilation, sounds like science fiction, but it has been tested, measured and confirmed in countless experiments. The odd part is that no one feels it happening. To you, your seconds always seem normal. You never sense them stretching or shrinking. It is only when you compare your clock with someone else's moving differently that the discrepancy appears. Imagine two friends, one staying on Earth, the other setting off on a spacecraft that travels near the speed of light. For the traveller, days and weeks unfold in an ordinary rhythm, sleeping, waking, meals, conversations. Nothing feels unusual. But when she returns, she finds that many more years have passed for the friend who stayed behind. They are no longer the same age. In the literature of relativity, this is known as the twin paradox, though it is not really a paradox at all, but a demonstration that time itself depends on motion. Each person experienced time as normal, yet their clocks disagreed because their journeys through space-time were different. Closer to home, these effects have been measured with astonishing precision. In 1971, scientists carried highly accurate atomic clocks aboard commercial airliners, flying them around the world. When compared to clocks that had remained on the ground, the airborne clock showed measurable differences, exactly as Einstein predicted. Time had flowed at a slightly different rate in the skies. The difference was tiny, mere billionths of a second, but enough to confirm that even ordinary travel can bend time. Today, the technology in your pocket depends on this strangeness. The GPS satellites orbiting Earth carry their own atomic clocks. Because they move quickly relative to the ground, their clocks tick more slowly due to motion. At the same time, because they are farther from Earth's gravity, their clocks tick faster than those at sea level. Both effects, one slowing, one speeding, must be carefully corrected, or else GPS would drift wildly. Within minutes, the system would be inaccurate by kilometres. The fact that you can open a map on your phone and see your location within a few metres is possible only because engineers take Einstein's time dilation into account every second of every day. The oddest part is how natural it feels to ignore this. You may look at your watch or your phone and believe those seconds are the same seconds that everyone else is living. Yet they are not. Someone on a mountaintop is living slightly faster seconds than you at sea level. Someone on a fast-moving jet is living slightly slower seconds. The differences are minuscule, but they are real, and they remind us that time is not universal. It is stitched to the path each person takes. To make this more relatable, think of music again. Imagine two friends listening to the same song, but one has a player that runs very slightly faster, and the other one very slightly slower. To each listener, the song sounds perfectly normal. Neither realises the tempo is different. Only if they come together and compare would they notice the misalignment. Time dilation works like that. Everyone hears their own rhythm as natural, but the universe allows each path to have its own tempo. This realization reshapes how we think about now. When you stand beside someone, you assume you share the same moment. But if one of you moves quickly away, or climbs into a stronger or weaker gravitational field, your nows will begin to slip apart. The divergence may be too small for ordinary senses, but on cosmic scales it grows dramatic. Near a black hole, time slows to a crawl compared to the rest of the universe. For a distant observer, an object falling into the black hole seems to freeze at the edge, never quite crossing. For the object itself, however, the plunge happens swiftly. Each view is correct, because time is relative to position and motion. Einstein's equations do not privilege one perspective over another. They tell us that the shape of space-time determines each clock's rhythm, and each rhythm is valid. The universe does not play favourites. It simply allows many tempos to coexist. That coexistence is what makes relativity both disorienting and beautiful. There is a quiet humility in recognising this. Our intuition tells us that our seconds are solid, shared, unshakable. Relativity whispers otherwise. Your seconds are your own, your minutes your own, and while they resemble your neighbours, they are not identical. We live not in a single beat, but in a harmony of beats, each slightly out of phase, yet together forming the symphony of space-time. It is also humbling to see how this strangeness has become part of ordinary life. Each time your phone guides you down a street, each time a plane navigates the skies, relativity is at work. These cosmic principles, once puzzling thought experiments, are now folded into the background of daily existence, invisible yet indispensable. It is as if the universe allowed us to borrow a corner of its fabric to build our tools, and in doing so it gently reminded us that the mystery of time is never far away. So as you rest tonight, perhaps think of your body moving at its own quiet pace, your heart marking seconds, your mind drifting. Know that someone in orbit above you, or halfway around the world, is living slightly different seconds. Yet both of you are right. The universe allows both to exist side by side in a vast and curved stage where time has no single master clock. And perhaps there is comfort in that. That time is not rigid, but generous, making space for many rhythms, many journeys, many lives, all unfolding together in their own gentle tempo. When Einstein dissolved Newton's steady river of absolute time into the curved fabric of space-time, he opened the door to an even deeper, more unsettling thought. If space and time are not separate but woven into one four-dimensional whole, then perhaps the past, present and future are not truly different realms at all. They may be equally real, all written into the fabric, like frames in a film reel that already exist from beginning to end. This vision is sometimes called the block universe, and it suggests that what we call the flow of time is less a current sweeping us forward, and more a journey we take through a landscape that is already laid out. Imagine unspooling a roll of film, one frame after another. The story seems to move when the frames are projected quickly across a screen. Characters laugh, run, stumble, fall in love. But in the reel itself, all the moments exist at once. The final scene is as present as the opening shot. The middle is just another frame waiting its turn. To live in a block universe is to imagine that we are characters on such a reel. We move from frame to frame, experiencing the sequence as if it unfolds, while in truth the entire sequence is already there. This is not merely metaphor. Einstein's equations show that simultaneity is relative. Different observers disagree on what counts as now. If there is no universal present, then dividing reality into past, present and future becomes a matter of perspective, not of fact. One observer's now might contain an event that for another observer lies in the future. The fabric of space-time does not privilege one slicing over another. It simply is, already stitched together. That thought can be strangely comforting, though also deeply disorienting. Comforting, because it suggests that the moments you have loved, the childhood summer afternoons, the laughter of a friend, the quiet evening walks, are not gone in some absolute sense. They remain embedded in the fabric, just in a region you no longer occupy. Disorienting because it suggests that your future is also already woven in, waiting for you like a city you have not yet reached, though the roads leading there are already laid down. Some physicists and philosophers embrace this view, calling it eternalism, the idea that all points in time are equally real. Others resist, clinging to presentism, the idea that only the present is real, that the past is gone and the future does not yet exist. The block universe sits squarely with eternalism, whispering that our lives are not written line by line, but inscribed as a whole tapestry. Consider how this changes our sense of movement. We often say time flows, as if there is some cosmic river carrying us along. But in the block universe, there is no flowing. There is only the static landscape of space-time, and what we call flow is simply our consciousness moving along its path, like a flashlight beam sliding across the pages of a book. The story does not change as the beam moves. Only our awareness does. This image can feel both serene and haunting. Serene because it releases us from the anxiety of losing moments. They still exist, even if we cannot return to them. Haunting because it challenges our sense of freedom, of open future. If the future is as fixed as the past, then perhaps choice is an illusion. Perhaps we're actors reading lines already written. Or perhaps the act of choosing is itself part of the script, a scene in the real that could not be otherwise. And yet, even if the block universe is real, our experience remains what it is. We feel time passing, we feel choice, we feel uncertainty. The character inside the film does not know the ending while the reel is wound. To live is to experience that unfolding, to walk through the tapestry step by step, even if from outside the tapestry it is all already woven. Let us bring this closer with something everyday. Think of a train journey. The track stretches ahead, already laid, curving through hills, crossing rivers, passing towns. To a bird above, the entire path is visible at once, from station to station. But to the passenger on the train, only what lies just ahead can be seen, the rest hidden by bends and distance. The ride feels like an unfolding story, even though the rails have been there the whole time. The block universe is like that. From a cosmic perspective, the track is fixed, but from the human perspective, we only discover it as we ride. There is poetry in this picture. It invites us to see ourselves as woven into a vast tapestry that includes everything. The first flicker of the Big Bang, the cooling of stars, the growth of forests, the rise and fall of civilizations, the private moments of laughter and sorrow in ordinary lives. None of it is erased. All of it exists in the grand four-dimensional block. We move through it like travellers exploring a landscape that does not change, though our path through it makes it feel alive. Of course, not everyone accepts this. Some argue that the block universe is a misinterpretation, that physics does not require eternalism, that the flow of time may still be real in ways we do not yet understand. But even critics admit that relativity makes the simple, comforting idea of a universal now impossible. Whether or not all moments exist at once, the present is not absolute. Time is more strange than our ordinary language can capture. So as you rest, you might imagine your life as a reel of film, already spooled, filled with frames that show your first steps, your present breath, and moments still to come. Or imagine it as a train line stretching across the landscape, hidden from your view but complete from above. Whether or not the block universe is true, these images can soften the ache of passing time. The moments you treasure are not gone entirely. They are part of the fabric, and you, moving gently through it, are the traveller who makes the story come alive. Einstein may have shown us that time bends and slows, that it depends on motion and gravity, that simultaneity is not absolute. Yet all of those revelations leave unanswered the most familiar mystery of time. Why does it have a direction at all? Why do we remember the past but not the future? Why do broken things stay broken? Why do warm cups of coffee grow cold but never warm themselves again? For this we must turn not to relativity, but to thermodynamics, and to a 19th century engineer named Sadi Carnot, who set out not to solve cosmic puzzles, but to understand the workings of steam engines. In the early 1800s, steam was reshaping the world. Trains roared across landscapes, factories hummed, ships cut through oceans without sails. Nicolas Léonard Sadi Carnot wanted to know what made one engine more efficient than another. He imagined an ideal machine, the most perfect engine that could exist, and in thinking about what limited its efficiency, he stumbled upon something profound about the nature of energy itself. No machine, he realised, could ever be 100% efficient. Some energy was always lost as waste heat. In other words, there was a built-in direction to energy flow, an inevitability to loss. Out of this practical problem grew the second law of thermodynamics, one of the most important principles in all of science. It states, in essence, that in any closed system, entropy tends to increase. Entropy is a slippery word, but for now you can think of it as a measure of disorder, or more precisely, the number of possible ways a system can be arranged. A neat, ordered arrangement corresponds to low entropy. A messy, spread-out arrangement corresponds to high entropy, and the second law tells us that the universe naturally drifts from order toward disorder, from concentrated to dispersed, from tidy to tangled. Imagine opening a bottle of perfume in a closed room. At first, the molecules are concentrated in one small place. Soon they spread out, filling the air. You never see the reverse. Molecules that were scattered suddenly gather back into the bottle. That would be a decrease in entropy, a return to order, and the second law tells us it is so improbable as to be essentially impossible. Or think of a spoonful of sugar stirred into tea. The grains dissolve and disperse. The tea becomes sweet. You do not see the grains leap back together at the bottom of the cup. Entropy has increased, and the direction of that increase is what we experience as the forward march of time. Carnot's engines made this vivid. Heat always flows from hot to cold, never spontaneously from cold to hot. You can warm your hands near a fire, but you never see a fire spring up because your hands happen to be cold. The one-way flow of heat embodies the arrow of time. It explains why you can scramble an egg but not unscramble it. Why you can mix cream into coffee but never see it unmix. Why every structure eventually decays. Entropy gives time its asymmetry. The microscopic laws of physics may be reversible, but entropy is not. There is poetry in this, though it is a sad poetry. Entropy is sometimes called time's accountant, keeping the books of every change. Each time energy is used, some of it slips irretrievably into heat, into disorder, into the background. And while locally order can arise, a seed can grow into a tree, a mind can build a cathedral, such order is purchased at the expense of greater disorder elsewhere. The total balance sheet of entropy only increases. To make the idea gentler, think of a tidy room. One afternoon you put everything in its place. The books aligned, the clothes folded, the desk cleared. Leave it alone long enough and entropy creeps in. Dust settles, papers drift, a forgotten cup of tea moulds. The number of ways the room can be messy far outweighs the number of ways it can be tidy, and so disorder wins. It is not malice, it is simply probability, written into the fabric of nature. Carnot could not have known, when he puzzled over engines, that his reasoning would one day be used to explain the arrow of time itself. He died young, at just 36, never seeing how his ideas would echo through physics, but the principle he revealed, that heat has direction, that entropy grows, has become one of the deepest truths we know. It links the ordinary, why soup cools in a bowl, to the cosmic, why the universe itself evolves from order toward disorder. There is a quiet melancholy in realizing this. Entropy means that everything tends toward dispersal, toward stillness, toward equilibrium. Stars will eventually exhaust their fuel. Galaxies will dim. Even memory itself may be traced to entropy, for remembering the past but not the future is tied to the fact that entropy increases in one direction only. Yet there is also comfort in knowing that this arrow gives us the very texture of life. Without entropy, without direction, there would be no story, no growth, no difference between before and after. Time would be a meaningless blur. So as you breathe slowly, picture a steaming cup of tea cooling on a table. Watch the tendrils of vapour curl upward, dissipating into the room. That simple scene, repeated millions of times each day around the world, is the second law in action. It is why clocks tick forward, why lives unfold, why history moves in one direction. Carnot's engines may have been built of iron and steam, but the truth they uncovered whispers across the cosmos. Entropy increases, and with it, time flows forward. By the early 20th century, physicists had long known about entropy. Thanks to Carnot, Clausius, Boltzmann, and others. They knew that heat moved from hot to cold, that disorder grew, that engines were never perfectly efficient. But it was the English astrophysicist Arthur Eddington who gave this tendency its most poetic name. In a 1927 lecture, he spoke of the arrow of time. He meant that the direction of increasing entropy gives time its one-way flow. The arrow that points from past to future, never the reverse. The phrase stuck, and nearly a century later, it is still how we describe the mystery of time's direction. The beauty of Eddington's phrase is its simplicity. An arrow has direction. It points somewhere. You do not confuse its head with its tail. In the same way, time has direction, and the clue lies in entropy. It is why you remember childhood, but not the centuries to come. It is why you can spill milk, but never watch it leap back into the glass. It is why you can mix paint colours together, but never separate them back into bright primaries without effort. The arrow points forward, because disorder increases. Eddington himself was a man of stars. He studied how they shine, how their interiors balance the crushing weight of gravity with the push of nuclear fusion. For him, entropy was not an abstract concept, but something written in the lives of suns. A star burns brightly because it is moving from a state of concentrated fuel to a state of dispersed energy. Over time, entropy grows, and the star moves inevitably towards stillness. In the end, it is entropy that dictates a star's lifespan, just as surely as it dictates the cooling of a cup of tea. To see entropy's arrow in everyday life, you need only drop a ceramic cup on the kitchen floor. It shatters, pieces skittering across the tiles. That image is immediately understandable. It is natural. The reverse, a shattered cup suddenly rising and reassembling into your hand, feels absurd. Yet if you look at the physics equations that govern the motion of each shard, they do not forbid the reverse. Newton's laws and even quantum equations work just as well backward as forward. If you could film the event and play it in reverse, the math would allow it. But in the real world, you never see it. Why? Because entropy tells us the arrow points one way. There are astronomically many ways for pieces to scatter, and only one way for them to reassemble. Probability itself ensures the arrow. This is perhaps the most astonishing part of the arrow of time. The laws of physics themselves are symmetrical. They do not prefer forward or backward. A ball rolling down a hill can be described equally well in either direction. But when you zoom out to large systems, the molecules of air, the water in a river, the people in a city, the overwhelming majority of arrangements lead toward greater disorder. The arrow emerges not from the laws but from the statistics. It is the chorus of countless particles, not the solo of a single one, that gives time its direction. Eddington emphasised that the arrow of time is not just a curiosity. It is woven into everything we experience. Cause comes before effect. Memory looks backward, not forward. You light a match and then see the flame. You never see the flame and then strike the match. The arrow is so fundamental to experience that we rarely stop to notice it. Yet once pointed out, it becomes eerie. Why should time have an arrow at all when the laws do not require one? Why should entropy increase in the first place? These are questions we still puzzle over. And yet, the arrow of time gives life its poignancy. Imagine if entropy did not increase. Imagine a world where events unfolded just as easily backward as forward. You might watch a scrambled egg reform, a wilted flower straighten, a candle unburn. But in such a world, memory would lose meaning. Choice would dissolve. The unfolding story of life would not exist because there would be no difference between past and future. The arrow is what allows history to be written, what allows us to grow older, what allows stories to have beginnings and endings. Eddington's arrow also gives us a kind of humility. Every day, every heartbeat, every thought unfolds along that arrow. You are carried with it whether you notice or not. You may pause to reflect, to rest, to sleep. But the arrow does not pause. It moves relentlessly. disorder quietly rising in the background. Even as you tidy a room, you expend energy and create disorder elsewhere. Even as you build a house, entropy grows in the wider environment. The arrow is patient, but it is everywhere. There is comfort, too, in the image of an arrow. It means time is not a fog, but a path. You may not know exactly where it leads, but you know its direction. You cannot go back to childhood summers, but you carry them as memories. You cannot leap into futures centuries away, but you carry them as hopes. The arrow threads those memories and hopes together into a line, allowing you to see your life as a story instead of a jumble of disconnected moments. So tonight, if you close your eyes, imagine yourself as a traveller carried on the arrow of time. Behind you stretches a trail of memories, laughter, tears, quiet afternoons, moments that shaped you. Ahead lies mystery, the part of the fabric you have not yet seen. Around you, entropy grows gently, inexorably, like the soft settling of dust in a sunlit room. The arrow does not rush, but it does not stop. And in its motion lies the very possibility of life, of change, of meaning. The arrow of time, as Eddington named it, points forward because entropy grows. That much is clear. But if disorder increases, then logically it must have started from a state of low disorder, a state of extraordinary orderliness. And here lies one of the deepest riddles in all of physics. Why did the universe begin in such an astonishingly low entropy condition? Why was the deck so neatly stacked at the very beginning when probability suggests it should almost always be messy? Picture yourself shuffling a deck of cards. If you shuffle long enough, the result is almost always a random mix. Every so often, by sheer chance, you might stumble into something tidy, like all four aces ending up together, but it is rare. Now imagine shuffling not just 52 cards, but all the particles in the universe. By sheer numbers, almost every arrangement corresponds to high entropy, a messy spread. Low entropy arrangements are astronomically rare, yet the early universe was precisely such a rare arrangement. Smooth, ordered, and exquisitely structured. It is like beginning a story with the deck already aligned, the cards in perfect sequence, waiting to be played out. Scientists call this puzzle the past hypothesis, the idea that the arrow of time depends on the universe having started in a special low-entropy state. If it had not, entropy would not have a direction to increase. Without that direction, there would be no arrow, no sense of past or future, no difference between before and after. The very fact that we live in a universe with memory, with history, with story, depends on this peculiar beginning. The Big Bang, as we imagine it, was not only hot and dense, but also remarkably smooth. Matter was spread almost evenly, with only the tiniest fluctuations. At first glance, that smoothness may not sound like order, but in the language of entropy, it was. A universe clumped into black holes from the start would have been far higher entropy. Smoothness meant potential for stars to form, for galaxies to gather, for life to emerge. Smoothness was low entropy, and from that beginning the arrow could unfold. Here lies the enigma. Why should the universe start that way? Why not begin in equilibrium, already disordered, already at maximum entropy? If it had, there would be no arrow of time, no unfolding history, no sense of becoming. The world as we know it would not exist. Instead, we find ourselves in a cosmos that began improbably neat, as though someone had tidied the room before we arrived. Some suggest this was simply chance, a fluctuation in a vast multiverse, a rare pocket where entropy happened to start low. Others suggest it points to deeper laws we have not yet discovered, laws that dictate that the beginning must be ordered. Still others leave it as mystery, an initial condition we must accept without explanation. Each idea is unsatisfying in its own way, yet each tries to grapple with the undeniable fact. The arrow of time depends on the low entropy past. To make the idea more tangible, Imagine a glass of water with ice cubes floating in it. The cubes melt. Entropy increases. The water warms toward equilibrium. But for that to happen, the ice must have been there at the start. Someone, or something, had to put them in. In the same way, the universe seems to have started with the cosmic equivalent of ice cubes, pockets of order ready to melt into disorder. Without them, the flow would not exist. Physicists like Roger Penrose have calculated just how improbable that beginning was. The numbers are so staggeringly extreme they defy imagination. The odds of such a low entropy state arising by chance are sometimes described as 1 in 10 raised to the power of 10 raised to the power of 124, a number so vast that writing it down would take more ink than there are atoms in the universe. And yet, here we are. Against those odds, the universe began in precisely such a state. This realization can feel humbling. You, lying here listening, are not simply a creature in time. You are a creature made possible by the universe's improbable beginning. Every memory you hold, every expectation you carry, every story you live depends on the arrow that sprang from that smooth start. The breath you take now, the thought you form, is part of a chain that stretches back to the low entropy dawn of all things. There is also something strangely reassuring in this. It suggests that the story of time is not merely a trick of perception or an illusion of the mind. It is rooted in the deep structure of the cosmos. The arrow flows because the past was special. We do not yet know why it was so, but the fact that it was gives meaning to every unfolding moment. So imagine the early universe, not as a chaotic explosion, but as a smooth glow, a sea of light spread almost evenly, with tiny ripples that would one day become galaxies. From that calm beginning, disorder grew, stars ignited, planets cooled, life emerged, and memories formed. The arrow of time, which you feel in your own heartbeats and days, is the echo of that ancient smoothness, still unfolding billions of years later. If Carnot revealed that engines could never be perfectly efficient, and if Eddington gave the arrow of time its name, then Ludwig Boltzmann gave us the language that explains why the arrow points forward with such persistence. He turned entropy from a vague sense of disorder into a precise statistical truth. His insight was simple yet profound. Entropy increases not because there is some mystical law forcing it, but because disorder is overwhelmingly more probable than order. Boltzmann was a 19th century Austrian physicist, brilliant and restless. At a time when many of his peers resisted the idea of atoms, insisting that matter was continuous, he argued that everything is made of countless invisible particles. Entropy, he said, is simply the number of ways those particles can be arranged while still producing the same overall appearance. The more possible arrangements, the higher the entropy. The universe tends to drift toward those states because they are vastly more numerous. To see this, imagine a box filled with marbles. At first, you place all the marbles in one corner. That is a low entropy state, highly ordered, but the marbles jostle and roll. Soon they spread out, bouncing around the whole box. There are far more possible arrangements in which they are scattered than in which they are clustered. Given enough time, the odds of them spontaneously gathering back in the corner are astronomically low. It is not impossible in theory, but so improbable that in practice it never happens. Disorder wins because it is the overwhelmingly likely outcome. Boltzmann gave entropy a formula, S equals K log W. Here, S is entropy, K is now known as Boltzmann's constant, and W is the number of possible microstates, the hidden ways particles can be arranged. It is a quiet equation, yet carved on Boltzmann's tombstone in Vienna, a reminder that his simple idea reshaped our understanding of reality. Entropy is not a mystical property. It is counting, probability, statistics, and from that simple arithmetic comes the arrow of time. Think of shuffling a deck of cards. There are more ways for the deck to be mixed than for it to be in perfect sequence. Each shuffle almost certainly produces a random-looking arrangement. If you were to keep shuffling forever, you might one day stumble into the ordered sequence. but the odds are so tiny that it would take longer than the age of the universe. In the same way, the molecules of air in your room could, in principle, all cluster in one corner, leaving you gasping for breath. But the probability is so vanishingly small that you will never see it. The arrow of time is probability, magnified by unimaginable numbers. Boltzmann's view carries both clarity and sadness. He believed he had shown why time has direction. It is not that the laws demand it, but that the statistics ensure it. Yet his contemporaries often resisted him. Many found the idea of invisible atoms distasteful. Others disliked the intrusion of probability into physics, preferring strict determinism. Boltzmann defended his ideas fiercely, but he lived with doubt, and his life ended in despair. Only later, when atoms were confirmed and statistical mechanics flourished, did his insights gain the recognition they deserved. Today, every time we speak of entropy, every time we trace the arrow of time, we are echoing Boltzmann. What makes his idea so powerful is that it bridges the microscopic and the macroscopic. At the level of fundamental equations, time has no direction. The motions of particles can run forward or backward. But when you gather trillions upon trillions of particles, probability takes over. The odds of disorder growing are so overwhelming that we see time flow forward. Our memories, our histories, our entire sense of before and after emerge from that statistical tide. To make this gentler, imagine a jar filled with red and blue beads. Shake the jar and the beads mix. The mixed state is high entropy. Technically, you could shake and somehow separate them again, but the odds are so tiny that you would wait longer than 1 billion lifetimes. The mixed state dominates not because some hand decrees it, but because there are vastly more ways for the beads to be mixed than for them to be segregated. That is the quiet wisdom of Boltzmann's dice. In the game of chance played by particles, disorder is the inevitable winner. And yet, within this inevitability, order still blossoms. Life arises, stars shine, music is written, memories form. Boltzmann himself knew this. Local decreases of entropy are possible, but only because greater entropy increases elsewhere. The Earth, bathed in sunlight, can grow forests and civilizations because the sun radiates far more entropy into space. Order exists, but it borrows against the greater tide of disorder. Each act of creation is like a child building a sandcastle, while the tide rises. The castle is real, beautiful, intricate, but the ocean will one day reclaim it. This vision can feel sobering, but also strangely tender. The fact that entropy increases does not make our moments meaningless. It makes them precious. A flower blooming, a memory forming, a song being sung. These are brief eddies of order in the grand river of disorder. They will pass, but while they exist, they carry beauty. To live in time is to live in the dance of improbability, to be a fleeting pattern in a universe that leans toward chaos. So tonight, as you breathe slowly and feel your body sinking into rest, you might imagine the countless particles that make up your room. Air molecules drifting, photons scattering, tiny eddies of heat curling away from your skin. All of them follow Boltzmann's dice, tumbling into the most probable states. Disorder grows, but within that growth you live, you remember, you dream. And perhaps that is the quiet gift of entropy, that in the midst of probability's vast inevitability, there is still space for improbable beauty, for ordered moments that briefly resist the tide long enough to be treasured. At the dawn of the 19th century, before relativity bent time and before quantum mechanics blurred it, a French mathematician named Pierre-Simon Laplace imagined a universe that was, in principle, entirely predictable. He pictured an intellect, later nicknamed Laplace's demon, that could know at a single instant the exact positions and velocities of all the particles in existence, every grain of dust, every drop of water, every planet, every star, every heartbeat, all of them described precisely in numbers. With that knowledge, Laplace argued, the demon could calculate both, the entire future and the entire past, with absolute certainty. Nothing would be hidden. The entire history of the universe would be laid bare, like a book already written from the first page to the last. This was determinism in its purest form. The laws of Newton's mechanics were perfectly reversible and perfectly exact. If you knew the starting conditions, you could in principle compute everything that would follow. A billiard ball struck on a smooth table would follow a predictable path. Add more balls, add more collisions, and the paths would grow more complicated but not less certain. The demon, with infinite intelligence and perfect calculation, would trace each trajectory without error. It is a vision that carries both awe and unease. Awe, because it suggests the universe is a vast puzzle whose every piece fits with mechanical precision. Unease, because it seems to strip away freedom. If the future is already calculable, then choice is illusion. Every decision you think you make, every word you speak, every path you take, all of it was written in the first arrangement of atoms and could never be otherwise. Laplace's vision suited the confidence of his age. The Enlightenment believed in reason, in order, in laws that could tame chaos. To think of the universe as a perfect clockwork was deeply satisfying. But even in his own time, cracks showed. The three-body problem, the motion of three celestial bodies under mutual gravity, proved resistant to exact calculation, chaotic in ways that defied simple prediction. And as the centuries turned, chaos theory would reveal that even deterministic systems could behave unpredictably in practice, because tiny differences in starting conditions explode into huge differences later on. The flap of a butterfly's wing, as the famous phrase goes, could alter the course of a storm. Yet chaos is still not the same as true uncertainty. The butterfly's wing is still determined by physics. We simply lack the precision to follow every detail. Laplace's demon would not be bothered by chaos. It would see the exact initial conditions and predict the exact outcome, no matter how sensitive the system. For the demon, there would be no surprises, no accidents, no mysteries, only inevitability. And then came the 20th century. Quantum mechanics arrived, and with it the unsettling discovery that nature itself may be indeterminate. At the smallest scales, particles are not tiny billiard balls, but wavering clouds of probability. Electrons do not occupy definite paths until they are measured. Radioactive atoms decay not on a fixed schedule, but according to chance. The laws of quantum mechanics do not say precisely when a single atom will decay, only the probability that it will within a given time. Here was a fundamental limit, not just of knowledge, but of reality itself. For Laplace's demon, this was devastating news. Even if it knew everything, it could not say exactly when a nucleus would split or exactly where an electron would be found. The universe was not a book written line by line in advance. It was more like a story told with dice rolls, probability shaping the plot. Determinism gave way to uncertainty, not just as a matter of ignorance, but as a matter of principle. This shift can feel dramatic, even harsh. To some, it opened space for freedom. If the universe is not locked, then perhaps choice is genuine, not just the playing out of initial conditions. To others, it is unsettling. If randomness rules at the deepest level, then what does that say about meaning, about predictability, about the stability of reality itself? A world of dice can feel less comforting than a world of gears. But perhaps there is another way to see it. Imagine a billiard table and a dice game side by side. The billiard table, struck once, rolls predictably. The dice, tossed once, land unpredictably. Yet in both games there is structure. The billiard balls obey geometry and momentum. The dice obey probability distributions. The universe may be some blend of both, gears at larger scales, chance at smaller ones, together weaving the fabric of time. And still, determinism has not vanished completely. Quantum mechanics governs the smallest particles, but larger systems like planets and people often average out to predictable patterns. You can forecast the orbit of Mars with great precision, even though you cannot predict the path of a single photon. The arrow of time emerges not from a demon's perfect calculation, nor from randomness alone, but from the statistical tide of entropy. Laplace's demon cannot exist, but its dream still haunts us. The idea that if we only knew enough, the mysteries of tomorrow could dissolve. Perhaps there is comfort in knowing that no one, not even an all-knowing intellect, can perfectly predict what comes next. It means the future remains open to experience, to discovery, to wonder. The arrow of time carries us forward, but the exact shape of its path cannot be foreseen in total. It leaves room for novelty, for surprise, for the unfolding of stories not already written in ink. So as you breathe slowly now, consider the contrast. One vision of time as an unbroken chain, every link forged in advance, the demon reading it like a script. Another vision of time as a path shaped partly by chance, a game of dice at the smallest scales, rolling unpredictably as we walk forward. Between them lies the world we inhabit, predictable enough to build bridges and plan harvests, unpredictable enough to keep each life unique. That mixture of order and surprise is perhaps what makes time not only a mystery but a gift. If the arrow of time points firmly forward, it is only natural that human imagination longs to turn it around. Few ideas have enchanted storytellers more than time travel. We daydream of returning to yesterday to undo a mistake, of leaping ahead to glimpse the future, of standing outside time's relentless march. From myths of gods who rewound the sun to modern novels and films that send characters spiralling through wormholes, the dream of slipping along the timeline is as old as memory itself. Yet when physics is asked to allow such journeys, it grows stern. The laws that govern the arrow resist our fantasies, and the barriers are not just practical but fundamental. At the heart of the difficulty lies causality. Imagine you could travel backward. You step into a machine, dial the date, and arrive in your own childhood home. Suppose you prevent your younger self from making a decision that shaped your life. Then the very you who made the journey may never come into existence. This is the grandfather paradox, a loop in which cause and effect devour each other. Stories often dance with these paradoxes for dramatic effect, but physics has little patience for them. If cause and effect are to remain meaningful, events cannot circle back on themselves without contradiction. Entropy adds its own weight to the argument. As we have seen, disorder grows. Eggs scramble, cups shatter, heat disperses. To travel backward would require entropy to decrease, molecules to retrace their paths, every grain of dust to return precisely to its place. The odds of such a reversal are so tiny as to be indistinguishable from an impossibility. You might as well expect smoke to leap back into a match or spilled ink to flow into its bottle. Time travel backward is, at least according to thermodynamics, a dream forever out of reach. There is another boundary, the speed of light. Einstein's relativity does not forbid moving quickly, but it insists that nothing with mass can reach or exceed light speed. As you accelerate closer to it, time for you slows compared to those you leave behind. In principle, you could travel into the future this way, race near the speed of light, return, and discover that more years have passed for others than for you. But to go backward, to arrive before you left, would demand faster than light motion. Relativity draws a firm line there, one that has held against every attempt to cross it. Stephen Hawking once illustrated this in his own mischievous way. He announced he would host a party for time travellers. The table was set, champagne poured, balloons hung. But he sent out the invitations only after the party had ended. If time travellers existed, he reasoned, they would have known and arrived. None did. The party was empty except for Hawking himself, smiling at the quiet. His conclusion was as playful as it was serious. If backward time travel were possible, we should already see its evidence. That we do not is telling, and yet the longing remains. There is something deeply human in the wish to step outside time. It comes not only from curiosity about the future, but from regret about the past. Who has not wished to go back and speak one word differently, take one path instead of another, hold on to one moment a little longer? Time travel promises. Escape from the arrow, escape from entropy, escape from the finality of choices. Perhaps it is no wonder that fiction keeps returning to the theme, even if physics shakes its head. Still, relativity does give us something tantalizing. Time does slow when you move quickly. Astronauts in orbit age slightly less than those on Earth. The effect is tiny but real. If you could accelerate close enough to light speed, you could leap far into the future. For you, only years might pass. For those left behind, centuries. This is not the time machine of folklore, but it is a real kind of time travel, though only in one direction, forward. Black holes add further strangeness. Near their edges, gravity is so strong that time slows dramatically. A clock hovering just above the event horizon would tick infinitely slowly, compared to one far away. From the outside, it seems to freeze. In a sense, black holes are natural time machines, though they offer no return ticket. The closer you approach, the slower your seconds fall, until at the horizon itself, time appears to stop altogether. But again, this is one-way travel. You can fall forward, never back. Perhaps this is the lesson physics offers. You cannot return to the past, but you can stretch the future. You cannot undo what entropy has done, but you can slow your journey relative to others. Time's arrow resists reversal, but it allows variation, bending and stretching enough to remind us that the flow we take for granted is not as rigid as it seems. For now, the time machine remains in the realm of imagination, and maybe that is not a loss. Perhaps the poignancy of life comes from its irreversibility, from the fact that choices cannot be undone, that moments cannot be relived, that memory is precious precisely because it cannot be rewound. If time travel backward were possible, would we treasure the present as much? Would we cherish memory, or would we simply visit it endlessly until it lost its glow? So as you lie here, listening, let yourself drift not backward but forward, carried by the arrow that no machine can reverse. The past is sealed, but it lives in memory. The future is unwritten, but it waits in possibility. And the present, this quiet moment now, is yours, unique, fleeting, irretrievable, and therefore infinitely valuable. If time dilation on airplanes and satellites is a gentle ripple, then near a black hole it becomes a tidal wave. These objects, born from the collapse of massive stars, are the most extreme laboratories of space-time we know. A black hole is not simply a heavy star, it is gravity pushed to its limit, matter crushed into a region so dense that nothing, not even light, can escape once it crosses the boundary called the event horizon. And because gravity bends space-time, the stronger the gravity, the slower the clock. Near a black hole, time itself slows to a crawl, creating scenes so strange that even Einstein would have paused in wonder. Picture yourself falling towards such an object. From your perspective, nothing unusual seems to happen as you pass the event horizon. You float in, seconds ticking as always, heart beating, thoughts flowing. But to a distant observer watching from far away, your approach looks different. As you near the horizon, your image slows, your movements stretch. The light from your body shifts to redder wavelengths, fading as though you were sinking into darkness. From their view, you never quite cross the horizon. You freeze, suspended at the edge, time itself halted. For you, the journey continues. For them, you have become a still image, forever approaching but never arriving. This paradox of perspectives is not trickery but relativity at work. The fabric of space-time is so deeply curved near a black hole that time cannot be the same for different observers. One person's minute becomes another person's eternity. The arrow of time still points forward, but its speed is no longer universal. It stretches and warps, tethered to the geometry of gravity itself. And black holes are not only places where time slows, they're also engines of entropy. In fact, they are the champions of entropy in the universe. Physicist Jacob Bekenstein and later Stephen Hawking showed that the entropy of a black hole is proportional to the area of its event horizon, not its volume. That means that as a black hole grows, swallowing matter and light, its entropy grows enormously. A single black hole can contain more entropy than billions of stars combined. In the grand account book of the universe, where entropy always rises, black holes are the biggest entries, the largest reservoirs of disorder. This was shocking when it was first realised. Entropy had always been associated with matter dispersed, with gases spreading, with energy flowing outward. But here was an object that seemed to represent concentration, collapse, gathering into one point. Yet the entropy was immense. The message was clear. The more extreme the gravity, the more extreme the disorder hidden within. Black holes are not just prisons of light, they are monuments of entropy. Then Hawking added another twist. Using quantum mechanics, he showed that black holes are not truly black. They emit faint radiation, now called Hawking radiation, as particles flicker into existence at the horizon. Over immense timescales, this radiation allows black holes to slowly evaporate, shrinking until they vanish. In that evaporation lies another paradox. If a black hole can evaporate completely, what happens to the information about all the matter it once consumed? Is it lost forever, destroyed by entropy, or does it survive somehow, encoded in the radiation? This is the black hole information paradox, and it remains one of the deepest puzzles of modern physics. In this way, black holes sit at the crossroads of time, entropy, and information. They show us that time is not uniform. It can slow almost to nothing under gravity's grip. They show us that entropy can reach heights unimaginable elsewhere, becoming woven into the very surface of the horizon. And they confront us with the question of whether information, the memory of the universe, can ever truly be erased. To bring this strangeness closer, imagine watching a friend fall toward a black hole. To you, their voice grows faint, their movements slow, their image dim. You call out, but no answer comes back. For them, there is no freezing, no fading. Their seconds continue normally until gravity overwhelms them. The two perspectives never agree, yet both are valid. Time is no longer a shared river, but a set of diverging streams, each bound to its own curve of space-time. There is a quiet awe in realizing that even the simplest acts we take for granted, seconds ticking, minutes unfolding, are fragile, contingent, malleable. Near a black hole, time is not a universal heartbeat, but a pliable fabric that can be stretched almost beyond recognition. What we call time is not an external rhythm, but part of the geometry of the cosmos, a geometry that bends under weight and mass, twisting the arrow into strange shapes. And yet, even in this strangeness, there is continuity. Entropy still rises. The arrow still points forward. A black hole may warp the tempo, may swallow light, may evaporate in whispers of radiation, but it does not reverse the flow. The broken cup does not leap back together, even at the edge of a horizon. The arrow of time survives, even in the deepest darkness. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine the night sky. Somewhere, far beyond, black holes sit silently, invisible except for the pull they exert and the whispers they emit. Around them, stars orbit more quickly than planets around the sun. Gas swirls, heated to brilliance before vanishing across the horizon. In those regions, time itself is stretched thin, seconds turning into centuries, the arrow still pointing forward, but with a weight that makes it stagger. And in the quiet of your own room, safe and steady, you can feel wonder at this, that the universe holds places where time itself nearly stops, and yet in that near stillness, the great law of entropy still whispers the same truth. It whispers here, forward, always forward. By now, we have seen how entropy gives time its arrow, how relativity bends its tempo, and how black holes stretch it almost to stillness. Yet, in the strange depths of physics, another question lingers. Could it be that the quantum world itself supplies an arrow of time? Or does it reveal that time's direction is even more mysterious than entropy alone suggests? To explore this, we need to step into the landscape of quantum mechanics, a place where certainty dissolves into probabilities, where particles exist as possibilities until observed, and where the act of measurement itself seems to change the story. At the heart of quantum mechanics lies the wave function, a mathematical description of all the possible states a system can occupy. Before you measure an electron, it is not in one place or another. It is spread out like a cloud, a haze of probabilities. When you measure it, the wave function appears to collapse into a single outcome. You find the electron here and not there. This collapse is asymmetric. Before measurement, possibilities bloom outward. After, only one remains. That asymmetry has led some to wonder if wave function collapse is itself an arrow of time. Imagine tossing a coin, but instead of spinning in the air as heads or tails, it spins as both at once, a blur of possibility. Only when it lands in your hand does it reveal a single face. In the quantum world, every particle is like that coin, existing in superpositions until forced into decision by observation. The act of collapse, choosing one possibility, seems to carve a notch in time. You cannot go backward to re-expand the single outcome into the cloud of many. Like entropy, the process feels irreversible, but is it truly? The underlying equations of quantum mechanics, like those of Newton or Einstein, are time-symmetric. They work as well backward as forward. Nothing in the mathematics demands collapse. The collapse is an addition, a rule imposed when we connect the equations to experience. This has led to debates that stretch across decades. Some interpretations say collapse is real and fundamental, a genuine arrow. Others insist collapse is only apparent, the result of interactions with the environment. In this view, called decoherence, the wave function never truly collapses. It simply becomes entangled with so many surrounding particles that the superposition can never be untangled. The arrow of time is not in the laws themselves, but in the practical impossibility of reversing the entanglement. Here, too, entropy returns to whisper. Decoherence increases entropy. The spreading of quantum states into the environment is another version of disorder growing. In this light, even the quantum arrow may ultimately be tied to the thermodynamic arrow. The collapse we see is simply the shadow of entropy, stretching into the microscopic world. Yet there are other arrows worth noting. Cosmologists speak of the cosmological arrow, the direction of time defined by the universe's expansion. Ever since the Big Bang, galaxies have been rushing apart. The expansion sets its own rhythm, a one-way unfolding of space itself. If the universe were to reverse and contract, some wonder if the arrow of time might reverse with it. But so far the evidence suggests that expansion and entropy align. Both point the same way. There is also the psychological arrow, the one you feel most intimately. It is the arrow of memory. You remember the past, not the future. Your thoughts flow forward, each moment carrying echoes of what came before but never previews of what will come. Neuroscientists tell us that memory itself is an entropic process. Storing information increases disorder elsewhere. Your brain, in encoding the past, generates heat, consumes energy, raises entropy. The psychological arrow is another reflection of the thermodynamic arrow, written into the biology of thought. All these arrows, thermodynamic, cosmological, psychological, and perhaps quantum, seem to point in the same direction. Disorder increases, the universe expands, memory looks backward, wave functions collapse. The harmony is striking, though whether it is coincidence or necessity remains unsettled. Some physicists argue that all arrows ultimately reduce to the low entropy beginning of the universe. Others suggest that the quantum arrow, if real, may be more fundamental still, the root from which the others grow. The debate continues, but perhaps it is worth pausing here, in the quiet, to reflect on what it means for us. When you recall a childhood moment, you are leaning into the psychological arrow shaped by entropy in your own neurons. When you notice your coffee cooling, you are watching the thermodynamic arrow. When you read that galaxies are rushing apart, you are seeing the cosmological arrow. And when you hear that a particle exists in many possibilities until measured, collapsing into one, you are glimpsing the quantum arrow. Different languages, different scales, but all pointing forward. It is easy to feel disoriented in these layers of arrows, as if time is not one arrow but a quiver full. Yet perhaps there is comfort in the convergence. The universe, from the tiniest particle to the grandest cluster of galaxies, moves consistently in one direction. That direction gives us stories, memory, anticipation, meaning. Without it, life would dissolve into static, a blur without order. So tonight, as you listen, imagine the arrows drawn gently across the sky. One arrow, faint but insistent, stretching through your mind as memory. One arrow expanding outward with the galaxies. One arrow hidden in every collapsing wave function, each particle choosing a path. And one arrow in the cooling of tea, the spreading of perfume, the settling of dust. They are not separate arrows, but different ways of pointing to the same truth. Time moves forward, and we, carried along, are both its witnesses and its creations. We have followed the arrow of time through philosophy, through relativity, through entropy, through black holes and quantum puzzles. Each step has pointed forward, reminding us that the universe is not reversible, that disorder grows, that moments vanish into memory. But what happens when the arrow has done its work, when entropy has climbed so high that it has nowhere left to go? What becomes of time when there are no more differences, no more changes, no more gradients to fuel the flow? Physicists call this imagined fate the heat death of the universe, and though the words sound harsh, the vision is more one of stillness than of violence. To picture it, start with something small, a fire in a hearth. At first it crackles, flames leaping, sparks rising. You can feel its warmth across the room, but as the hours pass, the flames die down. The logs collapse into glowing embers, then into ash. The warmth fades, the light dwindles. Eventually the hearth is dark, the air cool, the energy dispersed. The fire has not been destroyed. It has simply reached equilibrium, a state where energy is evenly spread and no more useful work can be done. Heat death is this story, told not in hours but in trillions upon trillions of years, not in a fireplace but across the entire cosmos. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy increases. Stars shine because they are far from equilibrium, burning nuclear fuel and radiating heat into cold space. Galaxies form because matter is clumped and gravity pulls it together. Life exists because energy flows from hot to cold, from the sun to the earth, powering growth and thought. But in the long future, those gradients will fade, stars will burn out, galaxies will dim, matter will collapse or disperse, and energy will spread so thin that nothing more can happen. The arrow will point forward, as always, but it will lead into silence. Imagine the universe billions of years from now. The stars we know have long since died. Red dwarfs, the most long-lived stars, have cooled into black embers. White dwarfs, neutron stars, and black holes remain, but even they are fading. Black holes themselves evaporate over unimaginable timescales. whispering away in Hawking radiation. Eventually, only a thin gas of particles and faint radiation fills space. The cosmos approaches uniformity, featureless and still. In such a universe, time as we know it may lose its meaning. Our sense of time depends on change, on differences, on arrows drawn by entropy. When everything is the same everywhere, when no processes unfold, when no clocks can tick because there is nothing left to measure, what remains of time? It may still exist as a coordinate in equations, but it would no longer be experienced. Without events, without novelty, time dissolves into abstraction. The arrow, once sharp and insistent, becomes dull, then vanishes. This vision can feel bleak, as though the universe itself were destined to end not with a bang, but with a sigh. Yet there is also a strange serenity in it. A fire cannot burn forever. To imagine the universe one day reaching equilibrium is to imagine it finding rest, the ceaseless churning of stars and galaxies giving way to calm. It is a cosmic stillness, a silence not of destruction but of completion. And along the way, order still blossoms. Stars have burned, planets have spun, life has thought and dreamed. Each local decrease of entropy, each pocket of order, each brief flowering of complexity has been purchased by the greater rise of disorder. The universe's history is a story of temporary structures, galaxies, stars, creatures, civilizations, rising and falling within the tide. The eventual heat death does not erase their meaning. If anything, it makes them more precious, as fleeting eddies in a grand river. For us here and now, heat death is so unimaginably far away that it poses no practical threat. Trillions of years will pass before the last star flickers out. By then, humanity will either have vanished, transformed, or spread into new forms we cannot yet imagine. The thought of heat death is less a prediction to fear than a perspective to contemplate. It reminds us that everything is finite, that even stars have lifetimes, and that our moments are brief but luminous against the backdrop of eternity. So as you rest tonight, you might imagine the universe as a great fire, crackling and flaring now in its youthful age. Galaxies blaze like sparks, stars burn like logs, life flickers like embers. In the far future, the fire will cool, the sparks will fade, and the logs will be ash. Yet the warmth we feel now is real. The light we see is beautiful, and the dance of the flames is no less wondrous for being temporary. The arrow of time carries the fire forward, and we, for our short span, are part of its glow. When we imagine the heat death of the universe, the picture seems final. Stillness, uniformity, no more gradients, no more stories. Yet the rules of probability whisper something stranger. Even in a state of equilibrium, where entropy has reached its peak, random fluctuations never completely vanish. Tiny chance rearrangements can still occur. Most are meaningless, a few particles clumping together briefly before dispersing again. But given enough time, vast stretches of time beyond comprehension, rarer and larger fluctuations could happen. And here lies the paradox. In principle, a fluctuation could be large enough to form something as complex as a brain, a momentary pocket of order arising out of chaos. This thought experiment is named after Ludwig Boltzmann, whose statistical view of entropy gave us the language of probability in physics. He himself suggested that perhaps the universe we see, ordered, structured, low in entropy, was itself just a fluctuation out of chaos. Later thinkers pushed the idea further. If fluctuations are possible, then somewhere, sometime, given infinite duration, the random assembling of particles could briefly mimic the structure of a conscious mind. A Boltzmann brain would flicker into existence, complete with memories, sensations, and thoughts, only to dissolve again a fraction of a second later as entropy reclaimed its dominance. The unsettling part is the mathematics. If the universe lasts long enough, The probability of a fluctuation large enough to create a single brain is far greater than the probability of a fluctuation large enough to create an entire low-entropy universe like ours. In other words, it should be far more likely for isolated Boltzmann brains to outnumber real, evolved observers like us. And if so, then statistically speaking, each of us should suspect that we, ourselves, might be such a fluctuation. A brief dream of consciousness with fabricated memories, living in a world that does not truly exist beyond the moment. This is the Boltzmann brain paradox. It is not simply a philosophical toy, but a genuine concern for cosmologists. If our theories predict that Boltzmann brains are more probable than ordinary observers, then those theories undermine themselves. After all, science depends on the assumption that our observations are reliable, that the universe we measure is real and consistent. If we are merely Boltzmann brains hallucinating a consistent world, then our measurements have no weight. A theory that predicts such a situation cannot be trusted, because it soars off the branch it sits on. And yet, the idea is difficult to banish entirely. Randomness allows even the improbable, given infinite time. You can think of it like rolling dice. Roll them enough times, and eventually you will see an unlikely sequence, say 10 sixes in a row. The longer you roll, the more improbable patterns appear. In a universe stretched across unimaginable spans of time, chance has the leisure to produce anything, even fleeting minds. The odds are low for each moment, but in eternity, low odds still come to pass. To bring it closer to everyday life, imagine steam rising from a cup of tea. The molecules scatter randomly into the air. Most patterns are ordinary, a gentle diffusion. But if you could wait long enough, far longer than the age of the universe, you might eventually see them align, for an instant, into a coherent pattern, perhaps spelling out a word, perhaps forming a shape before dispersing again. It would be absurd, yet not impossible. A Boltzmann brain is that kind of absurdity, scaled up to consciousness. The paradox leaves us with unease, but also with wonder. On one hand, it challenges our sense of reality. If random fluctuations are more probable than cosmic order, why do we experience ourselves in a vast structured universe? On the other hand, the very fact that we do experience such a universe suggests that our theories must be missing something. Many physicists take this as a clue that our understanding of cosmology is incomplete, that the true nature of the cosmos avoids the dominance of Boltzmann brains in ways we do not yet grasp. There is also something quietly philosophical in this speculation. If consciousness can flicker, however briefly, out of chaos, then perhaps the universe is more hospitable to awareness than we imagine. Even in its deepest stillness, even in its most entropic silence, there remains the potential for thought, for perception, for something like a mind. The idea is eerie, yes, but also strangely poetic. Awareness is so resilient that it can be imagined even in the end of all things. Still, most physicists hope that Boltzmann brains are not our fate, nor our reality. They are seen more as a warning sign. If your theory predicts too many of them, it may need revision. They remind us that probability, stretched too far, can lead to paradoxes that threaten the very ground of science. In that sense, Boltzmann brains are not literal prophecies, but mirrors, reflecting the limits of our current understanding. As you listen tonight, you need not fear that you are only a fleeting fluctuation. The continuity of memory, the consistency of the world around you, the shared nature of experience, all of these suggest a reality deeper than a statistical blip. But it is worth pausing to feel the strangeness of the idea. In the far future, when stars are gone and galaxies are dark, when entropy has climbed to its peak, perhaps, just perhaps, chance itself will dream. Out of stillness will come brief sparks, Boltzmann brains, flaring with thoughts, memories, illusions of a life once lived, before dissolving back into silence. It is a haunting image, but also a reminder. What we have now, a universe vibrant with stars, with light, with order, is not to be taken for granted. Against the infinite backdrop of possibility, our existence as coherent beings in a coherent cosmos is a rare gift. Whether or not Boltzmann Brains will ever haunt the distant silence, we, for this brief age, are more than fluctuations. We are part of a long story written in Entropy's rise, and that makes our moments all the more precious. The heat death of the universe paints a picture of endless stillness, a cosmos that fades not with violence but with silence. Yet not every physicist or philosopher has been content with that vision. Over the years, alternative endings have been imagined, some catastrophic, some cyclical, some endlessly strange. If the arrow of time began with the improbable smoothness of the Big Bang, might it one day reverse, or reset, or fracture into endings we can scarcely picture? These speculations are not settled facts, but they offer us ways to dream about what lies at the far horizon of time. One possibility is the Big Crunch. In this story, the expansion of the universe eventually slows, stops, and reverses. Galaxies that once drifted apart begin to fall back together. The cosmic fabric contracts, the stars crowd closer. The night sky grows brighter with each passing age, until galaxies collide and merge in a final frenzy. Temperatures rise, densities increase, and in the final moments, the entire universe collapses into an incredibly hot, dense state, perhaps echoing the conditions of the Big Bang. Some have speculated that such a crunch could lead to a new expansion, a kind of cosmic bounce where the end of one universe is simply the beginning of another. There is a poetic appeal in this image. Autumn leaves fall, decay into soil, and in spring new shoots rise from the ground. A star burns, collapses, and sometimes triggers the birth of new stars in the surrounding clouds. Why should the universe itself not follow such a cycle? The crunch and bounce model allows for renewal, for rebirth, for an endless series of universes pulsing like a cosmic heartbeat. Time's arrow in each cycle would point forward, but the cycles themselves would repeat, perhaps endlessly. Another possible ending is far more violent, the Big Rip. In this scenario, the mysterious dark energy that drives cosmic expansion does not remain steady but grows stronger. Instead of slowing, the expansion accelerates more and more until it tears apart everything. First, galaxies separate. Then stars drift from one another. Then even solar systems dissolve, planets flung away. As the acceleration continues, it rips apart stars, planets, molecules, even atoms. In the final instant, space itself fractures, and time as we know it ends. The Big Rip is the arrow of time running faster and faster until it shreds the very fabric it once carried. The thought is unsettling, but also strangely exhilarating. It reminds us that the universe is not a quiet backdrop, but an active participant in its own story. Dark energy, whose nature remains mysterious, could shape not only the fate of galaxies, but the fate of time itself. Whether it is steady, fading, or growing more powerful, will decide whether we drift into silence, collapse into fire, or dissolve into a cosmic tearing. And then there is the dream of eternal cycles. Some ancient traditions already imagine the cosmos as a wheel, turning without end. In modern physics, cyclic models propose that universes may succeed one another, each born from the collapse or transformation of the last. One version suggests that what we call the Big Bang was not the absolute beginning, but the rebound of a previous universe. Another imagines brains, higher dimensional surfaces, colliding in an endless dance, each collision birthing a new cosmos. In these pictures, time does not end but loops, endlessly, a serpent swallowing its own tail. For us, living in the present, it is hard to choose among these visions. The evidence we have today suggests the universe is expanding ever faster, a future more consistent with heat death, or perhaps the Big Rip than with the crunch. Yet science is not finished, and mysteries remain. Dark energy, the driver of expansion, is still not understood. Its true nature could alter our predictions, and so we wait, like travellers standing at a crossroads, unable to see beyond the next bend, wondering which road the cosmos has taken. But perhaps the most profound part of these speculations is not the specific ending, but the act of imagining them. To think of the Big Crunch is to think of endings that fold into beginnings. To think of the Big Rip is to think of endings that are absolute, shredding even the fabric of space. To think of eternal cycles is to think of endings that are illusions, each one secretly a new dawn. Each vision tells us something about how we see our own lives. Do we believe in renewal, in finality, or in repetition? The universe becomes a mirror for our own intuitions about time and death. So as you rest, now, imagine the cosmos in each of these fates. In the crunch, galaxies rushing together, the sky filling with light, then folding into a single blazing point before another story begins. In the rip, galaxies stretching apart, stars dissolving, atoms pulled into nothingness, time unravelling with space itself. In the cycle, universes rising and falling like breaths, each one unaware of the countless that came before, each one convinced it is the first. These are not destinies we will live to see, but they are images that give texture to the arrow of time, possibilities that enrich its mystery. And in each of these endings, silence, collapse, tearing, rebirth, the arrow points forward. Whether it leads to stillness, to fire, to dissolution, or to renewal, the arrow does not falter. It moves with patience, with certainty, with inevitability. Whatever the true ending may be, it will come not as an interruption of time, but as its final expression. For most of us, the passage of time feels more certain than anything else. We wake, eat, work, rest, and sleep again, and the rhythm repeats. Clocks confirm what our bodies already feel. The arrow moves forward. Days turn into weeks, weeks into years. Yet some of the most daring thinkers in modern physics and philosophy have suggested that this flow may be an illusion. Time, they whisper, may not be a river at all, but a story we tell ourselves, a convenient way of organising experience, a shadow cast by something deeper. One of the strongest voices in this direction is Julian Barber, a British physicist who has spent much of his life arguing that time does not truly exist. In his book The End of Time, he suggests that reality is made not of moments flowing one into another, but of individual nows. Each now is a complete configuration of the universe, like a snapshot. What we call the passage of time is simply our mind linking these nows together into a sequence. Memory makes us believe one now follows another, but all nows exist equally, timelessly, in a vast landscape he calls Plutonia. To picture this, imagine a photo album. Each photograph is complete in itself. None moves, none flows into another. And yet when you flip through the pages you see a story. A child growing, a family gathering, a holiday unfolding. The story is in your mind, not in the photos. Barber suggests the universe is like that album. The flow of time is our interpretation, not a feature of reality. The arrow in this view is something we impose, not something the cosmos requires. Carlo Rovelli, an Italian physicist working on loop quantum gravity, offers a similar but distinct view. In his book The Order of Time, he describes time not as an independent entity, but as a network of relations. Events happen relative to one another, but there is no universal clock ticking underneath. Time is granular, emergent, arising from interactions rather than existing on its own. At the most fundamental level, Rovelli argues, the equations that describe the universe do not even contain time. Time appears only when we look at systems in a certain way, as a macroscopic approximation. Like temperature, it is real enough for daily life, but absent in the deepest laws. Both Barber and Rovelli invite us to step outside our intuition. If they are right, then the sense of flowing time is like the sensation of motion when you're sitting still in a train and the train beside you begins to move. You feel yourself moving, but it is an illusion created by perspective. Similarly, you feel time flowing, but it may be nothing more than your mind stitching together moments into a continuous story. This is not an entirely new thought. Augustine, centuries earlier, already suspected that time lived more in the soul than in the world. The past exists in memory, the future in anticipation, the present in fleeting attention. Remove the mind, and time dissolves. Modern physics may be circling back to that ancient intuition, albeit in a different language. The idea that time is an illusion can be unsettling. If the future already exists as much as the past, are we simply playing out a script? If the flow is not real, then what of choice, of growth, of becoming? Yet there is also something strangely comforting in the thought. If all nows exist equally, then the moments you have loved are not gone. They are still there, forever part of the tapestry. Childhood summers, conversations with friends long past, quiet evenings you thought had vanished. They remain in Platonia, snapshots that do not fade. To make this gentler, think again of a film reel. The whole reel exists at once, each frame as real as the others. The movement comes only when the frames are projected in sequence. In a timeless universe, all the frames exist. The flow is our projection, our experience. Or think of a landscape. A traveller walks from valley to mountain to plain, and to her it feels like a journey, a sequence. But the landscape itself simply is. It does not flow. She moves across it, and her perception creates the sense of progress. Time may be the landscape, and we the travellers. These visions blur the line between physics and philosophy, but perhaps that is inevitable. Time touches everything, from the equations of cosmology to the beating of our hearts, from the lifespan of stars to the shape of memory. To ask whether time is real or an illusion is to ask whether our most basic intuition is truth or appearance, and maybe the answer is not either or. Time may be real in one sense, emergent in another, illusory in yet another. It may be like colour, not written into the equations of light, but real to the creatures who see it. So as you listen tonight, you might imagine your life not as a river, but as an album of nows, each page complete, each one existing in quiet permanence. Or imagine it as a vast landscape spread out timelessly, with your consciousness walking across it like a traveller. Whether or not time truly flows, the experience of flow is part of who you are. And perhaps that is enough, that the arrow you feel, real or not, carries you through meaning, through memory, through hope. We have wandered far, from Augustine's bewildered prayers in the 4th century, to Newton's absolute river, to Leibniz's relations, to sundials and railways, to Einstein's curved fabric, to Entropy's arrow, to Boltzmann's probabilities, to the strangeness of black holes, and to the possibility that time itself may be an illusion. Each step has opened another door, another way of looking, and now we find ourselves here, at the edge of the journey, not with final answers, but with a deeper sense of wonder. Perhaps the most honest voice we have met was Augustine's. He admitted he could not explain time. He felt it devouring everything, feared its fleeting present, saw it as both beast and river, and left the question unresolved. What then is time? That humility is still appropriate. We, with far more equations and telescopes than Augustine ever dreamed, still stumble at the same threshold. We know more, but the mystery deepens. Arthur Eddington gave us the arrow, a simple image that captures our everyday experience. It is an arrow you feel in your bones. You age, you remember, you anticipate. He linked that arrow to entropy, to disorder's inevitable growth. And Boltzmann gave us the explanation in probabilities showing that the arrow arises not from the laws themselves, but from the overwhelming statistics of particles drifting into disorder. Their ideas converge in the cup of tea that cools, in the dust that gathers, in the simple impossibility of reversing the shattering of glass. But in another way, Augustine, Eddington and Boltzmann were all circling the same truth. Time is elusive. It flows, and yet it may be an illusion. It is mechanical in physics, yet intimate in memory. It is the grand sweep of galaxies, and also the brief hush of a moment before sleep. If you think of your own life, you can feel all of these layers. You measure time by the clock on your phone, by calendars and schedules, Newton's legacy. You feel time in your body's rhythms, in fatigue at night and alertness in morning, in the slowing of childhood summers as memory thickens and the speeding of adult years as novelty thins. You sense time in entropy when a room grows messy, when a candle burns low, when the fire fades, and you glimpse time's relativity in the thought that astronauts age differently in orbit, that clocks on satellites tick differently from clocks on Earth. Each of these is true, and together they weave the fabric of lived time. The paradox is that while physicists argue over whether time is fundamental or emergent, over whether it flows or stands still, our experience of it is undeniable. You may tell me that the arrow is an illusion, that all nows exist equally, that the flow is only the stitching of consciousness, and perhaps you're right. But still, I remember my childhood, not my old age. I look forward to what is yet to come, not to what has already passed. I live in the arrow, whether it is illusory or not. There is a kind of peace in accepting that contradiction. We need not resolve it. We can let time be both, real and illusory, flow and structure, arrow and landscape. The very slipperiness of time may be its essence. It is what allows physics to build equations and poets to build metaphors. It is what allows us to imagine heat death and Boltzmann brains and eternal cycles, and still to treasure a single cup of coffee in the morning. As you lie here now, perhaps listening with half-closed eyes, you might think of time not as a puzzle to solve, but as a companion to notice. It is in your breath, in and out. It is in your heartbeat, steady and patient. It is in the weight of memory that fills your mind, and the lightness of possibilities that drift ahead. Time is the stage and the story, the arrow and the wandering, the mystery that refuses to be pinned. And when we wonder about the end, heat death, crunch, rip, bounce or illusion, we're really wondering about ourselves. We are creatures who live in time, who cannot help but ask what lies ahead. Whether the arrow carries the universe into silence, into rebirth, or into timelessness, our own arrow will carry us through memory and meaning. The universe's fate may remain unsettled, but the meaning of our moments does not depend on the distant billions of years. It depends on how we live them now. Augustine's question remains unanswered. Eddington's arrow still points forward. Boltzmann's dice still favour disorder. And yet, within all that, we are here, living, remembering, hoping, dreaming. Perhaps that is answer enough, so let us close gently. Time flows forward, but tonight, for these hours, perhaps it has slowed. You have wandered through centuries of thought, through stars and black holes, through physics and philosophy, and arrived back at yourself. Time has not been solved, but it has been shared, and in that sharing there is comfort. Our exploration has softly ended. Time flows forward, but I hope tonight slowed for you. Rest well.